In this demo, we're going to integrate Flow, Chat, SMS, and bots all into one nice integrated application, which is pretty darn cool. A lot of stuff working together to produce a really seamless application. So I'm starting out here in Community Cloud. This may look familiar. We've been using this community portal page for a while, and we often go into here and show how you can create a great flow in Community Cloud, use these cool Lightning components. But I'm going to jump ahead today, and we're going to focus on the interaction experience that starts when the user clicks on Have a Question. Now what's going to happen here when I click on this chat screen is it asks for some information, and now it's starting with an Einstein bot, so it's not going straight to the actual Service Cloud agent. Instead, it's giving a set of choices here. The first thing I might want to do is make a walk-in appointment. When I do that, the bot processes that and returns back a set of choices. And here are the set of choices, so I'm able to pick a choice and create an appointment. And then it returns me to the bot menu. The next thing I want to do is get my account balance. Now in this case, the bank wants to do a little account verification. So what it's going to do is it's going to send me an SMS message. And it knows my SMS number because it's got my contact information as Lauren Boyle. So when I click on this, listen in the background for my phone to ping, and if I'm looking at my cell phone, which you can't see right now, but on an SMS message just arrived, and you can see here that it says, please enter the confirmation code we sent on your mobile. My mobile currently says 0304, and that is, well, I'm going to type that in here, and that gets verified. And there's my account balance, $34,000.02. And then the final thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to transfer to a live agent. So I click here, and it's actually going to transfer me. And if I go up here where it's beeping, you can see omni-channel firing up. Here comes the chat. And I click on it, and it loads right into my Lauren Boyle contact and into our chat conversation. Okay, so let's talk about the different pieces of this. The first piece is this chat technology. This is called Live Agent. This is Salesforce's primary chat technology. If you go here, you can see that Live Agent can be activated into a service organization, and we've deployed a deployment called Brightbank Chat. So this is what's causing that chat screen to pop up, and here's information about Live Agent Chat as well. The second piece of technology here is Einstein Bots. So Einstein Bots, new technology. If we go over here, you can see that I'm in Bot Builder. So you get to Bot Builder, we go back here and we type bots. You can see that bots, Einstein Bots, shows up under Service Cloud Einstein. And I have deployed a bot called Banking Bot, and it's inactive right now, so we can work on it. And if we click on this, we go into Bot Builder, and we see a bunch of different screens here. So let's talk a little about how flow interacts. We've got two flows. This first flow is going to basically tell Twilio's Authy service to send an SMS that includes a 4-digit code. That's all it's going to do. It calls a particular API that Twilio Authy makes available and says, here's a phone number, go nuts. So what is it providing? The call to Twilio is being made by this flow action called Phone Verification Helper. And phone verification helper expects two things. It expects an API key and a phone number. The phone number is pretty obvious. The API key is how you link to a particular Twilio Authy account. So I have created one over here. And here is my production API key. And you can see that this is it. Starts with a G, ends with a J. And I need to pass, if I pass this to Twilio, it will use my account. It will use my production account. So that's all pretty straightforward. And how do we get that API key when we run the flow? Well, we could hard code it into this flow, but that would be bad security and would mean that if we change the API key, we'd have to change our flow. We could pass it into the flow, which is better, but it requires a certain amount of management. We have to remember, we're still left with the question of where do we store it so that we can pass it into the flow. So we're going to use a different approach to solve that storage problem. We're going to look up the API key, and we're looking up this thing, this MDT item, and that's custom metadata. That's a custom metadata type. And if we go over here, you can see that custom metadata types live in setup, and you can create them, kind of like you can create flows. And we've got one here called phone verify setting. So that's what's being called. So our record lookup is calling this custom metadata type. Here it is again. We're looking this up, and we're extracting the API key field from that metadata type, just like we would look up a custom object and extract a field from it. If we go into this custom metadata type, you'll see that here's where it has an API key field. So it's been set up with an API key field. If we double click on that, you can see that it has a value. So here is the API key. So we've taken the Twilio key from Twilio, remember that's over here, and we're storing it in our Salesforce org so the flow can use it. And that is one of the useful things about custom metadata types. It allows you to store settings and records that are useful for something so that things like flows can get at them. And if we edit here, you see that we can change this value. If we go back to the type itself, you can see that it looks a lot like a custom object, and we could add additional fields besides API key, just like you could add custom fields to an object. So what we're doing here is we're going to grab that API key in the record lookup, and then we're going to pass it to this flow action, which was written in Apex, and that is going to send, that's going to result in an SMS message being sent. So when I got the 4-digit code on my phone, I punched it in. How does that work? Well, the first thing is that Einstein is waiting for a value to be entered. If we go back to Einstein Bots, you can see that we've got a couple of different things going on here. First, we have this action, and then we have this question. Then we have another action. And then we have some rules and a next step. So it's a little like flow. It allows you to set up a sort of process. We already talked about this. This is how we started out. We called that initial flow. So this goes and sends off that SMS message. The bot actually then immediately asks a question. Please enter the confirmation code we sent you. So it's going to sit there and wait. And we can go back here, you can see that here's where it asked that question right after it sent the SMS message. And it captures, you can see here, it's going to capture the answer. So it's capturing the answer in a bot variable called code. Now once it has that, it moves on. So now we call a second flow. This second flow is similar to the first flow, but it's going to take this code that was typed in and it's going to send it back to Twilio for verification. So in this case, we've got two inputs this time. The first time, we just needed to give Twilio the phone number. This time, we need to give Twilio the phone number, and we need to give them the code that the user has just typed in. And here's where we're pulling those values out of the bot variables. And we're going to get some responses back from Twilio. Now, when we got responses back the first time, we didn't actually do anything with them. We kind of didn't really care. It's like, okay, Twilio, go send this SMS message. But this time, we need to check the value that comes back and make sure that the user typed in the right verification code and that they actually have the phone corresponding to this person's contact. They got the SMS, etc. So the test is pretty straightforward. We're going to check a return value called verification check status, and if that's true, then we're going to move on to the show account balance dialog. If it's not true, we're going to move on to the verification failed dialog. So if we go back here, you can see that what happened was, we entered in the correct one, so it went to the show account balance, and it made this information visible. So that's how the bot works. Let's take a look at that second flow. So if we look at this, you can see it's very similar. This record lookup is actually identical. We're looking up the same piece of metadata. We're extracting the same API key. This is slightly different. Its action is has a similar name. The other one was phone verification helper. This is phone verification status helper. We're passing in an API key and the phone number just like before. We're also passing in a verification code. And so that's going to make the call, and it's going to return back the message, the status, that then gets returned to the bot. The bot makes some decisions, passes that back to the chat in Live Agent, and so it all works. And so Flow is enabling this nice seamless engagement. Now, for those of you who are interested in the code, let's take a look at these actions. So let's take a look at phone verification helper. So we're using the standard invocable action pattern for working with Flow. We've got our requests stored in a little class here. This is where the phone and the API key get passed into. And our responses are defined in this class right here. Here's the key invocable method that is actually going to carry out the verification. And you can see here that we are making a RESTful call to this RESTful endpoint. And this is the API that we've gotten from the Authy documentation. And then in the payload, we are providing the key, the phone number, a few other things. We're hard coding in SMS and a country code. And then we're setting up a verification response to hold the response value. And so now we use standard Apex. We set up the HTTP request. Notice that we have to put the API key into a particular header that Authy is looking for. That's a pretty common mechanism when making web calls. We're setting it to post. We're adding the payload into the request. And then we post the request off right here. And then if we get a weird status code, we basically return the status code and to explain why. Otherwise, we're in good shape. So we take our response with the delightfully descriptive variable O, and we add that to a list and return the list. And if you're not familiar with that part of the invocable action pattern, you always send and receive lists when you're traveling data between flow and an Apex class, and that is so it can handle collections and do bulkification. So that's what's going on here. We're calling this particular API endpoint verification start. Let's look at the check verification, which is in this one, which is quite similar. You can see that it's got an extra input variable for the verification code. It's got an extra response with a variable for debug information. And the API we're calling is slightly different. The other one was verification/start. This is verification/check. And the payload is a little different, but it's basically the same thing. We get our response, and we pack it into a list and return the list to flow. So that gives you a sense of how this is all put together. I hope you find this very useful.